Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So the first question was anyone going to be here this morning? That was the first because I changed the time. And what's that? Okay. Oh, okay. So yeah, I changed the time. I wasn't going to post a message yet because I could see the traffic, but I'll explain that in a minute. And then Paul messaged me to say, is that happening? And at that point it was happening and I was going to be on time. I might be 5 minutes late, but it was fine. Man plans and God laughs. So let me share with you this lovely story. We had the honor and privilege of being at a wedding in Tunbridge Wells yesterday. And the beautiful thing was that the chuppah was outdoors and the sun was shining through the clouds as the chuppah took place. And we had a wonderful time. And because the wedding was going to end late, and since I don't drive, but Elchanan does and would want to take part in all of the simcha, including the alcohol, and they very kindly said that we could stay in a hotel overnight. So they arranged that for us, which was great. And this morning, anyway, I had to get up, I think, shortly after 6 to make sure my boys got up in the morning. And I turned on Waze, Google Maps, actually. And on Google Maps, it said, if you leave very soon, you'll get back and it will be fine. So we did. And then we're driving, following Waze. And then I have my phone. So Elchana's driving, following Waze, and I have my phone. And I decided to kind of double check us and constantly be looking at Google Maps at the same time. And it kept saying like, this way is going to take you, the M25 clearly had half an hour of sitting still on it, which is very infuriating. So we decided, of course, I decided I should take full credit. We're going to beat the system. And there was a route on Google Maps that said it was going to be way quicker. And we drove that way and it was going like a really interesting way. And I saw we were going over the river at a certain point. That's fine. Miles to Paris. No, so it was to get home. It was definitely till home. At one point, Elchana said, "Are you sure we could go to Stansted if you want? We could go somewhere exciting." Okay, we were heading home, and then suddenly we realised that we were on the queue to go on the ferry, which crossed the Thames. So we went on a little ferry. We went on a ferry this morning from South London to North London. And it's all my fault because the route said it was going to be about 20 minutes quicker. But the thing is, they don't calculate that you're sitting waiting for about 20 minutes to get on the ferry and then about 10 minutes to get off the ferry. And the funniest part of it all was as we were getting off, this very smiley ferryman was standing at the barrier, you know, as we were about to go off, and he was just giving us instructions. And we rolled down the window, and Elchanan said, "We've not done this before." I said, "I know." He said, "I was watching you," and he had this big smile on his face because he must have thought, "Oh, those people thought they were going to beat Waze." So we were where we were meant to be, and we've had a very early start and we didn't get here quite on time, but thank you everyone for your flexibility. I'm going to give you in a minute what Elchanan's take on, because I said, what's the message for the Emunah class? So I'm going to give you that in a moment. And then I had actually something else on it, which connects quite beautifully in what we were talking about. I'd love to do that. It's just the one that goes over the ferry. It was fun, I have to say. It was like this, and it's not like a ferry, you just drive onto something that feels like a piece of road and then it just moves across the river. So yeah, if you're ever bored and have a few extra hours and you want to avoid the M25, go for it. No. Yeah. Huh? Is it not? Oh, it's not free. Okay, well, how do you pay? They didn't ask for money. You have to go on the, oh gosh. Okay, see, that's good that I told you all the story, because now we won't have a £700 fine waiting for. Okay, so anyway. It didn't say anywhere to pay. There wasn't like an oyster tapping thing anywhere. Oh, that's true. So
she'll be late next week. The way that she's coming.
So, yeah. The first question is, how many people are able, also, let's put out, who needs to leave at 10:30 today? Okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so what we're going to do is, if you need to leave, that's fine. We will continue longer. And people are here. Who's okay to stay till 11? Okay, okay. So we'll do our best with the time we have. Okay, so just before I give you Elchonan's take and then my take on the ferry ride this morning, our learning today is as a refuah shalema for Akiva Eliezer Chaim ben Rachel Chaya Tamara, a little boy, a son of a friend of mine, who needs a refuah shalema, and that he had some worrying news this morning. But please God, the learning we're doing together should be as a merit for him and for everyone. And also, please God, there should be peace, because we're all once again thinking of Israel, thinking of everyone around the world. And we really just need an end to, it's nice to be able to come and laugh about a ferry trip, but we need an end to the fighting. We need an end to terror. We need peace. We desperately need peace. And that's what we continue to pray for. Okay, so Elchonan's take on this morning was something to do with, sometimes you think you know where you're going, and then someone will come up to you and say, oh, you thought you've been here before, but actually this is a new experience for you. And it's about kind of thinking about that new experience. And I think that ferryman really did make a big impression on us. And obviously we made his day too. But what actually it made me think about, which connects really beautifully, and so we've had two beautiful letters written in this morning, and an article that someone shared with us as well, was when I was studying music GCSE, one of the songs that we studied was Don't Pay the Ferryman. Does anyone know it? What's it talking about?
I can't remember. I didn't remember it.
So it sounded like don't pay the ferry. The chorus goes something like, don't pay the ferryman, don't even fix a price, don't pay the ferryman till he gets you to the other side.
That's the old Roman thing. You take the ferryman to cross into.
Excellent. So I didn't realize when I first listened to it, I thought, okay, it's talking about ferryman. You know, we went from South London to North London. Don't pay. Well, you have to pay on the app apparently, but don't pay till you get to the other side. Okay. But the idea that nearly could have happened, yeah. So but this idea of, you know, the Greek mythology, that Roman mythology, that there's someone going to take you in a boat from this world into the next world. I thought how interesting that there was literally a ferryman there this morning. I then played the song for Elchonan because he didn't study music GCSE, so he's like, how do you know that song? I said it was from music GCSE. But it's an interesting idea of, you know, do we believe in the idea of someone escorting us from this world to the next? Well, not really, but at the same time, we do believe the souls from the next world are there to carry us through. So it was just quite an interesting idea to think of this morning on my way here. We're going to be talking a little bit more, some of the ideas we discussed last week, which was to do with passing from this world into the next. And we've been discussing that, I guess, for a couple of weeks. So I just thought it was really interesting to meet the ferryman this morning. But thankfully, the ferryman helped us get here. A little bit late, but we made it here anyway. It was meant to be. Okay, I'm going to start with, so if you remember last time I shared with you a task that I forgot to put on the WhatsApp group. We have one very studious member of our group who did the homework anyway. So no pressure on everyone else, but you want to be like her. But the idea was to find a verse from Tehillim or from our prayers, many of which are Tehillim, that really speaks to you, and see what the message that speaks to you is. So this is from Psalms 4, verse 8, which says, you put happiness in my heart, even when it is the grain and wine of others that flourishes. Were Israel and I joined in peace, I could lie down and sleep, for you, God, allow me to dwell in safety. And I thought how interesting that this is the verse that we're being shared this morning with everything going on in the world. I love the idea of being joined with Israel in peace when I will be able to sleep feeling safe again, about faith replacing fear. When Almog spoke of the way in captivity, they tried to make him pray with them. It made his belief in Judaism even stronger. And after his release, together with Ben Ladani, who was shot 7 times and survived, started to lay to fill-in every morning. The Shema is at the heart of everything the hostages held on to. So I think most people were here to hear Almog and Ben, but I think one of the wonderful things that they kept saying is we're not religious, and then they tell you that they lay to fill-in and say Shema every day. You know, like clearly they haven't been to our Emunah series and realized that there's a different way of defining religion. And even Almog, who was one of the hostages who was rescued in this unbelievable, miraculous operation. You know, Ben, who he spoke with, was in the special forces and said it doesn't make any sense that they were able to do what they did, and the fact that they saved those 4 hostages was truly, truly miraculous. But Almog was saying, you know, one day we're going to start keeping Shabbat, kind of thing, and all the time saying, you know, we're not really religious, but they're obviously on an amazing journey and inspiring the Jewish people, as are so many of the people that we're hearing messages from. Speaking about that, I've heard really unbelievable feedback from people about the Nova exhibition. So I know some people have been. There's a group going from Shul, but if you have the opportunity to go, I think it sounds like the sort of thing you want to go with someone else. I don't think you'd want to do it on your own.
Is it going ahead on Sunday?
Yes.
Because I'll go up because I haven't heard anything.
Yeah.
They're going to send out a link.
Oh, so none of us have heard. Okay. Fine.
Yeah, but there's a nice group going together.
Yeah.
So I think that going with people is really good. If you can't go with the Shul group, just, you know, to have an opportunity to spend some time there. And I think what it sounds like also is so powerful is to hear from survivors or families of people, unfortunately, who lost their lives. But I think, you know, it sounds like a really difficult but life-changing or life-affirming, maybe even experience in a similar way. It's a smaller way in a way, but in a similar way to going to Poland, you know, to actually be there and feel like you're part of something sounds very powerful. Okay, so a challenging email from Lawrence, because he said I'm allowed to tell everyone it's him. You'll tell anyway. You'll tell from the email. It's just continuing the discussion from last week, really. Hello again. I was thinking the other day I had nothing to write to you about after all this time. I thought we had covered most things and others should write to you. I agree, others should write. Then yesterday we had an interesting discussion on the wishes of a person who wanted to be cremated. The fact that the person who survived the war with a number on his arm wrote a book which was about his relationship with his maker is dismissed as not worthy, as it was disturbing, worries me. I have not read the book, but I have known that other books written about the relationship between man and God, his good side and bad side. As you know, I do not believe that God is always right. I think he makes mistakes and can be vengeful. I can discuss this with you as you are open to hear this heresy. It's good that he knows. But others are very uncomfortable and not open to have this view in an open discussion. If people are so insecure that they cannot hear an opposing idea, then what does it say about the faith they say they have? If they have strong faith, they should be strong enough to hear an opposing view or alternate view without your faith being affected. We have talked about how we do not know what the plan is for ourselves. We have to go with the flow and accept the bad things and the good things. The fact bad things happen or are allowed to happen should always be open to be discussed. To shut down the argument because you have your faith tested says more about a person's insecurity than being firm in your belief. So I want to first clarify that, and then we're going to move on to the second part, which also, so I already clarified this with Lawrence in person, but what I wasn't saying was that it's not okay to read a book that shows that someone has challenges with God or is putting God to trial. My understanding from Rabbi Sitner was it's a very disturbing book. I didn't feel that was something, originally when he told me about it, I was like, oh, perfect, I'll get the book. It'll be something interesting to discuss with our group. So it's a disturbing book. It's also not a particularly well-written book, but he did buy the book. But he just wasn't saying, oh, this is something that I'd really recommend to you. If anyone wants to read the book, I'd be very interested to hear what your insights are. But I think sometimes it's okay to read books about people who believe differently to us. That I'm fine with. And this one wasn't a recommended one. That was kind of what I was saying. But I definitely think the point is valid, that I think it's important that we can hear different people's views. I think it's important that we don't kind of just say, like, I only want to listen to someone who's saying the same as me, because actually I think that's where really interesting debates and discussion come about. So I agree with you, Lawrence, on that point. Next, who felt better that the man was buried in Jerusalem? Not him or his family, but the people who arranged for him to be buried there. It was done for them, not the man who wanted cremation. I think if the funeral home had called a less orthodox rabbi, then he most likely would have had his wish honored. I would say if they would have called a rabbi who wasn't orthodox, then he would have. I think an orthodox rabbi wouldn't have honored his wishes, but I agree with you. If it was someone who wasn't orthodox, that might have happened. Can we ask if doing something we think is right? Can we ask if doing something we think is right be a wrong thing to do? I enjoy the weekly talks we have, as I can see that Judaism is not just a simple idea, as it is complex and a force for good. It is a code to live by, which gives a structure to our daily lives. That does not mean I think we should shut down any criticism just because it challenges core belief in one God who is always doing good things. Thank you for allowing us to be open and seeking answers to questions which are difficult. I don't mind if you give out my name, as it's not a new thought I've been talking about with you. Everyone would have guessed who wrote that anyway, right? I didn't need to tell you. So this idea, I said already last week, this idea of not honouring someone's wishes is a really difficult one. It sits difficultly. Yeah, is that right? With difficulty. Uncomfortably, thank you. That's a better word. Sits uncomfortably with me. And yet, I know for this man's soul, who I love as a fellow Jew, even though I've never met him, the most uncomfortable, terrible thing for him would be for him to be cremated. And I have to carry both of those things. And I think it's okay that we all carry both of those things. And maybe if the situation would have come to one of us, we would have made a different choice. I do also believe if we think of, you are where you're meant to be, God has a plan. Why did the funeral director call Rabbi Sitner rather than any other rabbi in the area or anyone in the area? Was that part of God's plan? We'll never know. Right. What put it in the funeral directors? Like, why did they call that? So I know that the shul he was the rabbi of was a very, very large old shul. So maybe that was the establishment. Like as an example, if someone was calling Bush, if something happened in Bushy, they'd know to call Bushy Cemetery or Bushy Shul. So it's kind of, it would just happen that. Whereas in Edgware, maybe they would call a different denomination. But is that part of God's plan? There was this. I think for me, the bit that kind of rang in such an interesting way was that this Chaim who had put God on trial, to my mind, it was as if God was saying to him, you know what, I don't have the answers for you. I can't explain it to you in this world, but I'm going to carry you in the most special way I can into the next world and show you the answers there. I know it doesn't answer. And I wonder if anyone here has any thoughts in terms of going against someone's wishes. That's very difficult. And I know people have sometimes family members and you feel you can't go against their wishes because that's what they want.
Can you take one step back and ask me to explain
why is cremation? Yeah.
I was just trying to think where it actually came from. Get to a
great question. So on our lovely scenic ride this morning in the rain, I did do some research about burial, but not about cremation actually. So maybe that's some homework for me. I will come back to you on that. I'm trying to think. Yeah. So we know the body has to be buried whole, but I'm wondering if there's a specific.
Is it because of the spirit? The spirit's there.
The soul, yeah, the soul, right, and so the soul till burial. So this was a little bit what Alyssa was talking about. The soul's hovering over the body till burial, and then that's like the final separation when the body's buried in the ground. Then the soul can go back to heaven. So I understand the idea of burial is very important. What I'm not sure is if there's a specific mitzvah that says you shall not cremate someone, or it's just part of that you have to bury everyone. So I'm not sure about the cremation bit. I need to look into that.
That may be tradition. Doesn't it say
No.
to come into this world
Yeah.
When we leave this world, we leave it in the same way.
That's the earth. Yeah. So and the idea is you go back into the earth to decompose.
Not leave this world in ashes.
Right. So the idea of burial, and you go back to back into the ground you come from. What was interesting, Alice, I'm going to come to you in a second. What was interesting is on this website that I looked up, it's called Loving Kindness, I think, the website, and I could see it's an American based charity, and they have counselors to talk to people about burial. So the idea is, if someone has someone who's considering cremation, this is a Jewish place that you can send them to say, why don't you have a talk with this person, and they can explain to you why burial is important. So it was more on that side, and a lot of it was actually talking about, one of the big things that people care a lot about is being good for the environment and green, and that's what happens. You get buried in, not a reinforced coffin, it's a simple coffin, and the idea is that the body kind of goes back into the earth that it came from. There's an idea also in terms of, so I want to look more into the cremation side specifically, but I know one of the things is, in order to have the resurrection of the dead, which is something that's a tenet of our faith, there needs to be bones there to resurrect. And I think I've shared this with a group before, there was an idea of eating a meal called Melava Malka, which is the meal after Shabbat. So at the moment, it's very, very late, and we're not always particular about it, but they say that it's a merit that the luz bone, which is a bone in the back of your neck, should stay intact, because I'm rocky on her neck. That should stay intact, so that, please God, when Mashiach comes, when Tchiat HaMesim occurs, that they're going to be resurrecting the dead from that. So you need bones. That's part of our belief that it all comes down to their belief that life doesn't end when someone dies in this world.
You're a scientist, or you have been. What's your view on the want to give their body to scientific research?
So I think it's quite challenging from a halachic perspective, because it doesn't respect the dead in the way they need to. Once someone dies, we wouldn't want to do anything to tamper with the body. Yeah.
There's no debate on that.
I don't know. I will find out. Alison.
It's an interesting idea. Decades had no idea about body, the soul, this life, another life, resurrection. They don't teach that phase away, and then it seems to be a gap.
Yeah.
Teach them. The reason I'm saying all that is, first of all, maybe I'm not saying there's so much I didn't know. When I think about something, I don't know about this man, but how many people make decisions about anything in life, but especially how they die, and choose cremation with absolutely no idea of the bigger picture. And I think it's really sort of it's a sad, difficult concept, because was he or others making a decision based on facts or not? And if you're making a decision based not on knowing facts,
Yeah. I mean, what I shared last time is this idea of someone from the community shared with me that a lot of Holocaust survivors want to be burnt because that's what happened to their family members. And I do hear that, but there's a difference between someone who chooses to be cremated and someone who was, put in the gas chambers in the crematorium. And then there's a good question, like, how do those people have Tchiat HaMesim? But that wasn't their choice. But to make a choice to be cremated is a really, and you're right, it's not something we really talk about, but I think it comes under the whole bracket of, like, we don't really talk about death, and we don't talk about it as being a passage into the next world, and we don't talk about coming back again afterwards, and we really should, because actually, if you look in our text, it does, it's the second bracha in the Amidah is Machayei HaMetim. We say it every day, 3 times a day, that I believe that God will bring us back. but we don't talk about it. And maybe that's what's important, that we do begin to talk about it. Yeah. So that's the interesting thing. Is it about having education around burial? You know, we just assume because, you know, you're United Synagogue members, so you pay a fortune for your burial. So obviously you're going to want your burial. But actually to teach people that that's something that, please God, you should, you know, it's a merit to be able to be buried. And I really feel that whenever we go to Auschwitz, and we go often, the crematorium is where many of my family, their souls left this world there. So I feel that that's a very holy, holy place, but there's no grave. Seth.
I think the only positive thing out of this whole scenario was that his son got to read Shul, and it didn't say whether he had grandchildren, but if he did have grandchildren, he would have given them a chance to pay their respects to their grandfather, because whilst he was alive, there was no communication between the sons and father. But a grandchild is different. They have a different relationship. And the only thing that I can relate to in that specific situation was that my cousin that lived in Singapore, that was brought up by my grandparents, her mother died at childbirth and her dad disowned her because he blamed her for his wife dying. So my grandparents, which were her grandparents, brought her up, and then the war happened, and she escaped from Singapore and went to live in Australia. And she hadn't had any communication with them from the time she left till the time we took her to Israel, and she visited their graves. And it was a very, very moving experience for her to come in contact with what were her surrogate parents, but they were her grandparents. And I think that type of situation for a grandchild to have some kind of connection that they wouldn't have had whilst they were alive can be extremely moving.
100%. The whole idea of having a matzeva to go to is so powerful. But again, it's something that we have to talk about and discuss so that people realize how important it is. Susie.
My sister-in-law is actually a doula. I always thought it was a midwife, but it's end of life. And she's approved so many organizations to give her time free. And it's shocking how they're not open, so that she could give a talk and actually explain to people so that they have choices and prepare and then fully understand. But it's still at a point where people do not, it's the organizations, not just individuals.
Yeah. So I've done the end of life doula training course, and actually there's an amazing lady called Linda Goldberg who many of you might know. Her father-in-law was Manfred Goldberg, the Holocaust survivor. So Linda Goldberg she's a retired metastatic breast cancer nurse. So you can imagine she's dealt with a lot of people at end of life. I've called her. I met her actually through someone in this community who was near the end of life. And she's just one of these unbelievable people. And part of what she's now trying to set up is a Jewish end of life doula course. It's kind of unofficially set up at this stage. There's quite a lot of people who've done the training. And when someone knows that they have a terminal diagnosis or they're near end of life, it is the most incredible thing to have someone to have those conversations with. And she shared with me about how, you know, sometimes she'll have a conversation with someone, a young person who's at the end of life. And she told me that, you know, the woman wants to speak about how she's feeling and what her worries are and what her thoughts are. And no one in her family wants to have those conversations. And I know they're hard conversations. And sometimes it's easier to have those conversations with someone who's not your loved one. And that's what she can do. And she's going to have a whole team of people to be able to support people through that. It is such an important thing. But do you know what? Someone doesn't need to be at end of life to have the really interesting conversations. So things like, we just had a training on writing an ethical will. You can be any age to write an ethical will. It's such a wonderful act. Maybe it's something we can think about together once as a group. You know, we're not talking about a financial will, but an ethical will. What is it you want your family to know about when you're not here? And when you're not here could be in 70 years' time, or it could be tomorrow, who knows? But it's still, the message is such a wonderful thing to be able to share with family. So those are the sort of conversations that are really remarkable. And I told all of you that I went to this conference in America about end of life. I've now spoken to Sharon Daniels, who heads US Chesed, and we're going to try and see if we can put on something similar here, because I think it's such a wonderful thing. And questions like, why not cremation, definitely should be part of it, because we all need upskilling, as you can hear.
Can I ask you if you've looked at different religions and what they see about cremation? Yeah.
So I don't actually know. I wonder if anyone here does.
Well, we should actually do.
Yeah.
It would be interesting because a lot of them are mirroring to what we are.
Yeah. I don't know if Christianity allows it or doesn't allow it. I don't know.
Yes, they do.
They do allow it. It's really interesting,
In
isn't
fact,
it?
they have more cremation.
Yeah. Yeah. So what Alyssa shared with us is that the minority of Jews in America are now buried, and that's what's really hard for, or it should be hard for all of us. Like that's, and I think that goes to Alison's point, is most people just don't have the education. They don't realise that actually it matters.
Elisa's book, which I think I shared last week, I couldn't put down. It opens up a lot of the questions that I've never even thought about, or I had no knowledge of. And my Alan's a bit cynical about things, but Shabbos, it was pouring with rain, and the book was on the side. We didn't come to Shul. He picked it up, where he's going to read it. He read the whole thing. We had a discussion about it. I mean, it talks about Rebbetzen and all that, things we didn't even know. So if you've not read it or you've not got it, it's a brilliant book. I've lent it to my daughter. So eventually,
Yeah, we'll pass it round. Pass it round to them. Yeah.
You were talking before about coffin, how we use a modest coffin and not ostentatious. However, in Israel, we're buried in shrouds. Why is that? Why don't we follow that custom?
Is it British law?
Yeah, it's just a law here.
The law
Same
here
way
that we
we have
can't.
to wait for disposing, there they put it straight away,
Is it to do with the law?
It's done on
Yeah.
the first day.
Yeah.
So you'll have to ask the question.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's legal.
So I thought that because I used to make this, the company made this out for a while, and they were made mainly for the Sephardi. They weren't made for the synagogue.
So I know they order them from a company. I don't know where, but they do use shrouds. Yeah, sure. I'm not the right person. One day I'm going to join the Chevra Kadisha. I haven't yet, but I'm not the right person to answer the questions on. Can ask the rabbi, he'll know more. Okay. So lots to think about, lots of research that I need to do as well. And like we said, there's a lot to learn. I think maybe that would be an interesting session to do together, to like an ethical wills workshop. Maybe we'll trial it here. So something else nice that happened to me this past week was on Wednesday, we had a United Synagogue Rebbetzins conference day in London, in central London, where I've just kind of come from. So it was meant to be in Regent's Park, and you'll remember the week before the weather was beautiful, and then on Tuesday it started pouring, and then on Wednesday we were like, should we do it outside, shouldn't we? We didn't do it in Regent's Park. We were in Central Synagogue, which was beautiful, but it wasn't in the park. Hashem had other plans for us. But the day ended with Rebbetzen Hannah Hughes, who was the Rebbetzen of Radler, and some of you may remember she had a major cardiac arrest, and she told us her story. And please God, we will bring her to speak to this group, and then you'll bring all your friends and family and everyone you know, because it's the most incredible talk I've heard in a very long time. She is just a walking miracle. There's no other way of describing it. So I'm going to try and arrange that as a treat for her.
Very well when she came.
Yeah, but that was before. She's a therapist. She's an amazing person, but this story that happened to her on Shavuot is just beyond miraculous.
And her husband was a
He was. That's right. Everyone remembers the football playing rabbi. Okay. So Amanda Jeske is currently, no, she's just left, I think. Going tomorrow. Okay. They came for her mother's stone setting as well as for some simchas. And she shared with me a page. She told me we were having a catch up, and she told me about she's reading a book called The Soul by Rav Adin Steinsaltz. Now that sounds like the sort of thing we want to bring into this group, right? So I haven't yet managed to add it to my very big growing pile of books that I'm meant to be reading next to my bed. But she did take a picture of one section which I wanted to share with you. That obviously had a bigger impact on her, and I thought it would be something interesting for us to think about. Okay, so this is talking, so Rav Steinsaltz is talking about the root of your soul. So it's a little bit of a different, we're kind of veering a little bit away, but it's still kind of very much rooted in what we've been speaking about. So we're not talking about now the soul leaving the body, we're talking about actually recognizing the root of our soul in our body. What does that mean? So it's starting in the middle of the concept, but hopefully we'll pick up what we're talking about. So for example, perhaps you belong to the world of prayer, according to the root of your soul. But maybe you were raised in a world that led you in a literary direction instead, or your own talents may have led you in such a direction. So Steinsaltz is saying there's an idea of every one of us has a root of our soul, but sometimes life takes us in a different direction and we might not be truly connected. So if a person is born with the root of their soul being prayer, but they grow up surrounded by literature and books, and they kind of think that that's the main direction that their soul should take. So even if you distinguish yourself in the world of literature, your achievements are not necessarily related to the root of your soul. While you are capable of succeeding in these literary pursuits, they are not what your soul requires of you. For this reason, our spiritual quests have practical ramifications. They determine what we should be doing according to the root of our souls, and they are especially significant when we have no external guidance to lead us on an authentic path. This kind of predicament is illustrated in a story about a follower of Yehuda Aryeh Leib, Alter, the author of the Sfas Emes. In his younger years, this man reached great heights in his Torah studies. One day, he was asked to be the rabbi of a community. When he went to Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Leib to ask for a blessing that he be successful in his new position, his Rebbe, surprisingly, told him that according to the root of his soul, he should become a shoemaker. Although the young man possessed all the skills necessary to be a rabbi, the Rebbe saw that his soul required that he be involved not in the rabbinate, but rather in productive labor. Consequently, the young man declined the rabbinic appointment, learned the art of shoemaking, and was thus occupied for the rest of his life. What's more, each year he would present the Rebbe with a new pair of shoes. What do we think about this concept? So I've heard the story said another way, and Rabbi Ozer says he doesn't think that the story's true, and Rabbi Ozer is a very, very knowledgeable man. But there's a story that's told about the Netziv when he was a little boy, and I think the reason that Rabbi Ozer says that he doesn't believe it is because there's evidence that when the Netziv was a very, very young boy, he was already a tremendous scholar and unbelievable Torah person, even from a very young age. But anyway, we're going to tell the story anyway because it's just interesting to contrast it. And one day he was a lobus, he wasn't taking his studies seriously. That's the bit that Rabbi Ozer says that he doesn't think it's true about the Netziv. But anyway, and he wasn't taking his studies very seriously, and his parents were despairing. They didn't have much means. They were paying a fortune to send him to school to be able to learn Torah, and he didn't seem to be doing well. And one night, they were having a discussion amongst themselves, and they said maybe it's time to apprentice him to a shoemaker. The times can't, he's not going to become anything. And he actually, what they didn't realize was he was upstairs listening. And because he was upstairs listening, he decided to change his life around. and he became the Netziv. And what the tale goes, that after 120 years, he comes up to heaven, and Hashem says to him, if he wouldn't have become the Netziv, Hashem would have said to him, where's all the books that you were meant to write? Where's all the Torah you were meant to bring into the world? And he would say, what? I'm just a humble shoemaker. You know, like why are you asking me that? And they would have said, no, you had so much potential. You could have become the Netziv. So I've heard the story told in the reverse, in a bit of a humorous way, that nowadays, you know, anyone can write a book. Anyone and everyone, we know, right? You just can put together a book and call it a sefer and try and sell it, and some of them are good and some of them aren't any good, right? There's no, in the olden days, to write a book was really like laborious and expensive, and nowadays you can just print a book and write whatever you want, and even use AI to help you write the book, right? It's not such a big deal to write a book. So, you know, someone in like a joking way said, you know, after 120 years, someone's going to get to heaven and they're going to say, all these books, all these svarim, where are the shoes you were meant to make, right? Like, but I actually think whether the story about the Netziv is true or not, the point that Rev Steinsaltz is saying, it's a really interesting one. And the question is, what is the root of our soul? And it's a new concept for me. And it's a really challenging concept, because the Sfas Emes isn't someone you can just go to anymore who can say to you, I can see the root of your soul is, you know, to serve this world by manual labor. That's the root of your soul. Or I can see the root of your soul is prayer. Or I can see the root of your soul is something else. But isn't that an interesting concept, that maybe each of us has this particular trait or mitzvah or idea that our soul feels or our soul is meant to focus on and can become more complete through?
It reminds me of the story of Sachs, when he went to the Rebbe and said, I don't know what to do to be a philosopher. And this, the other one was, it was not going with it. And the Rebbe said, none of those, crossed it out. And completely inherently said, didn't have, you know, didn't have a direction to go with.
Right. Could you imagine if Rabbi Sachs would have become an economist? I'm sure he would have been, what's that? Yeah. I mean, I think it would be great for the economy, but what about, you know, think about everything that he did for the Jewish people, and right, it takes
traveling in America.
Yeah.
And if that hadn't happened, he could have just taken another route.
Yeah. You think about how many other people are there out there who could have done so many different things in the world. And then I think it comes back to us. Do we have this kind of divine, it's not revelation, because we don't believe in, you know, we believe that nevuah, like the divine revelation, prophecy has finished when the temple was destroyed. But there are definitely some people who have a very strong understanding of people and their souls, and definitely if you go to Kabbalists as well. But I think in terms of each of us, I think sometimes we do have a bit of a sense, not that we know like, oh, this is what I'm meant to be doing in life, but I think sometimes we just have that feeling like, I'm doing the right thing. This feels like it fulfills me. This feels like I'm making a difference in the world. And I'm not saying this man, if he would have gone and become a rabbi, he would have not felt fulfilled. Whereas when he was a shoemaker, it's really helpful to have someone that can go and tell you. And I think that was the Navi, the prophet in the olden days used to say to us, this is the direction that you should take in life. But I thought it's a really interesting concept to think about, the root of our soul. And I wonder if anyone here will go away and think about like what is it that really resonates with me? Like, what is it that I've always been drawn to? So for some people that might be education, for some people that might be charity, for some people that might be, you know, doing things with your hands, creativity. I think in a way, maybe sometimes it's easier if you think in terms of like children. Like when you look at little children, sometimes you can see they've just got like a certain thing, like you could just like they're the ones who's going to be, like sometimes people will say to us like which one of them is going to become, going to be a rabbi when he's older. And I'm not sure if any of our kids, I think often rabbinic skips a generation. It did with Elchanan, his grandfather was a rabbi. None of the children were the like you need a generation to get over the rabbinic trauma, whatever that is. But it is an interesting thing. Like you look at children, I think sometimes you can see it a bit more easily because they're almost like blank canvases, but then you see like there's something about them, and whether they can take it in a certain direction, it's just a really interesting concept, I thought, to think about. The root of our soul. That's a new one to throw into the mix. And if I have a chance to get the book and read it, I'll tell you a bit, or if then someone else wants to. Yes.
When we were growing up, we didn't really, or at least I should say we didn't have much, I didn't have much choice. I remember an interview with our headmistress, and this was at a very good girls' school. And she would tell each girl when they came in what they would be doing. And she said to me, and she said, yes, dear, teaching. Well, she couldn't have been more wrong. I did not enjoy it. I enjoyed so many other things, and I listened. And I think for me, the lesson is you've got to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
And do what you
yeah.
Not what somebody else says.
Yeah. And I think if, it's like, again, coming back to that, like still silent voice, like you have to be quiet long enough and at any time in life, we're not talking about a career, at any point in life, to just be quiet long enough to think like, is what I'm doing, does that just sit with me? Does it feel right? Or actually, should I be looking at, maybe I should do something different. Maybe I should do it differently. I think that's really, I've shared before here about in Malka's school, they had an open day, an evening where religious women of all different sorts of careers were in a room together. And I mean, she laughs at me, Malka, because I've been 2 or 3 times and I get emotional every time, because I wish when I was 14 or 15 or 16, someone would have said to me that, religious women can do, there's a doctor there, there's doctors there, there's scientists, there's lawyers, there's social workers, there's sourdough bread company runners, there's shaitel people, there's hairdressers, there's any kind of career that you want to do. There are people doing it and you can speak to them. But I think you're right, even then, it's about saying like, what? And it's not about what you do, it's about who you are, kind of thing. So we're not talking about necessarily a career, but it's about, am I quiet long enough to actually listen to myself? And I think that we could all do with spending a bit more time with ourselves and listening to ourselves. So.
That's very interesting. You come into something for your life's work or even for a life's hobby, you just fall into it. Now, is it because we watch our parents and see what they do and we follow in their example? Not necessarily doing the same work, but you follow their example of work ethic, charity ethic, or whatever it is. But there's something that leads us down a path and makes you fall into how you are. And it is quite interesting because I look at my life and think, should I have done this? Could I have done this? And then I think, well, nothing. I got through life. I'm still getting through life. But later on, but now I'm retired and I'm not working in that sense where you have to earn a living to feed my daughter. So I have to do that so much. But now I've stopped. I'm free to do things which really interest me. And I'm finding that, some of you may know, I give talks now, so I have to do research. And I really enjoy looking up the subject I'm going to talk about, learning from it or having a grounding in any. And it's a totally different I've always enjoyed what I've done.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing this.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a feeling we get to find something we enjoy doing.
Mm.
It's funny how it comes around.
Yeah. And I think it's, it's a combination of nature and nurture.
Yeah.
But, who knows if when you were, I don't know, 17 or 18 or whatever age, someone would have said to you, actually, go and do some research. And then that could have been your life's direct, like, who knows? But part of it is, I think you're right, it's the opportunities you're given at the different points in your life. But it's not just about a career or about volunteering it's about knowing the root of your soul. And I think that's really. Okay, we'll take this conversation. I think for me what's interesting, so as I've shared with many of you, I wanted to be a doctor and I got into medical school and then I decided to do another degree, which I didn't particularly enjoy and hasn't really, other than sounding very good on a CV, hasn't really had a lot of practical application in my life, should I say. But our son Ruvain, like, there is part of it that obviously I'm very excited that maybe one day he'll do medicine. But from when he was 2 or 3 years old, he was fascinated by health. Like, I remember my uncle coming to our house, and no, my uncle didn't come to Simcha, and my aunt saying that he wasn't well. And my Ruvain really, like, he wasn't saying like, oh, there, dear, how are, like, he was like, but like, what's wrong? And he wanted to understand, like, how his body was working or not working. Like, it really is part of who he is. And whether he does go down that path or not, like, who knows? But I think sometimes whatever path he takes with it, I think that will always be a part of his curiosity. So right now he's, thank God, enjoying learning in yeshiva, and I'm sure he brings that same curiosity to the studying he's doing there. And I think that it's really difficult. Like, how do you know who's meant to take what path? We don't have prophets nowadays. And I think, Leslie, you're right, it's about listening to yourself, but sometimes even that's hard. You can't always know. But I thought just such an interesting idea for all of us to go out and just think about, like, if I had to, let's say, write 10 things down that I'm passionate about or that I feel a calling to or that I feel connected to, and then if I had to narrow that down to 5 and then to 3 and then to 1, I wonder what that would look like. I haven't done the exercise, so I don't know. But I wanted to be able to share that with you.
Isn't it, for me, purpose? I don't know, I just want to say the word purpose. What is the purpose of my being here? And how life choices that you end in touch.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think to find something that you feel like you're doing something to make a difference.
I love that idea, the idea of purpose. And I think that complements this idea of a root, the root of the soul, because we can have different purposes throughout our life. And what Lawrence said about it changed at different stages of life, that's fine. But if our soul has a root to our soul, then that's almost like all those purposes can feed into, like, what is that? But we don't necessarily know. So that's part of the interestingness of life, is to kind of try and discover that, or try to think about that.
I think what Lauren said about the tribes is, because I think that when we're engaged in near children and maybe having a career or not, we're too busy and we're getting on. But retirement is a huge opportunity. It's what makes being much older worth getting to. Because sometimes you think, well, the kids, they're doing things we don't understand, the world has changed. But actually, really, and I think for me, actually, this is very personal. Me, Shul.
We're grateful for it, yeah.
And I think we all have that chance now to do what we really want to do and impact somewhere, no matter how small.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we often think about in terms of like Kira organizations, they'll often talk about like the young families or the young adults, like those are the most impressionable ages in people's life. You know, those are the ages where you can really get someone to change and to connect and I understand it in terms of like the future, etc. But what we've seen through community work is actually, you're 100% right. A lot of people, either when they're retiring or when they're, you know, less busier households, or those are some, like, I mean, look in the room, how people are setting aside time every week to connect with God. Like, to me, that's really powerful. We've got Rabbi Herman's going to be joining us this Shabbat, so that's very exciting for us. Who is just such an amazing treasure of Anglo Jewry, he really is. And he's, you know, someone who's really, I remember he once did a training session for us, and I said to him, well, I don't think it was me actually, someone asked him, how many people have you made from? Yeah, because he's worked in seed for decades and decades and decades, and he said, I haven't made anyone from. And he says it's not, no one can make someone anything. He can help show them along the way. Yeah, so I thought that's great. And he's not saying it to be like, but he is, yeah. And so yeah, definitely make sure you're here. He'll be giving the back at Bushy this Shabbat, and also Suda is going to be at 8 o'clock. Super Suda. 8 o'clock. We're going to have an earlier Suda so that we have a chance to really learn from him and spend some time with him. We're really such an honor to be able to welcome him to our community. And I know lots of people have contacts over the years with him, but I do think this is a really interesting idea. And all of us can think about it. Like, when do you actually have time to stop and think about your relationship with God? Often it is when kids have grown up, or when careers slow down, or when you just stop and take the time to think.
Our youngest grandson, who's 19, is travelling because he decided he wasn't passionate enough about anything to go to university at 60,000 plus.
So he's spending £60,000 on travel instead?
Yeah. And he just decided he was going to travel. He's coming home actually on his 20th birthday from China. He's travelling all around, and he sends all these photos. These are the most amazing places. I have no idea where he found them, but obviously he's done the research. But we had a conversation. He phoned Moti Shabbos, and I said to him, well, you're coming to the end of your trip. What are you going to do? I said, Grandma, I've got absolutely no idea. I said, but you've got to get on with life. He said, all I know is what I don't want to do. So he's thinking about it, and he said, if I don't know, I'm going to go and get a job, earn some money, and I'll go traveling again till I found what I want to do. So I think there are young people out there. Unfortunately, there are a lot who are unemployed, but they're not following a path because they're being told to.
Yeah.
They need to go, and somewhere in his soul, he's looking for something.
Yeah. And please God, we should find. Yeah. Israelis are great at that because they go to the army and then they go find themselves. Maybe we should also, at whatever age we're up to, find all our poor.
Myself having regrets. I'm looking way back. Very easy. It's the Jewish of being regrets that we did. My biggest regret is when we knew anti-Semitism from the start, 2005 and 6, I think we're here. The team that I was working with saw it, knew it, but didn't do anything enough about it. They tried to do what they could about it, didn't do enough. That's a huge regret to me. Had we stopped them much earlier, we might not have got to where we are today. So, what's the Jewish regrets? Should we regret them?
Yeah.
If we don't have regret, then we ever learn.
So there's a concept of teshuvah. I don't think it's the same as regret, though. So Shava is saying, sorry, I don't know, it's good to regret something so that you can grow from it, I hear. But to hold on to guilt just because it's a really comfortable Jewish feeling, does that help us grow? So using the anti-Semitism idea, if your thinking can help now, that's great. If not, do teshuvah, say I'm sorry. On Yom Kippur, do your al chait, genuinely say you're sorry. Commit not to do the same thing again, and then move on. Because actually, if the regret is just dragging you down, it's not helping humanity or yourself. But if it is something that, by regretting it, it's going to make you improve, that's what teshuvah is. So I think it's a healthier way. It's very hard because I think we do hold on to guilt in all sorts of ways. It's a the guilty Jewish trait. I'm aware we're finishing time, so I'm going to just finish with Rocky.
I think that regret is something that you're not ready earlier on in life to have done those things. So, and so there are things that you're sorry you didn't do, but you weren't ready to do those at that time because you haven't really possibly thought about doing them earlier. You only think about it later on. So it's
like the benefit of hindsight.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are lots of things that we could all have done when we were younger or, whatever, but we weren't ready to do those things. Because if we were ready, we'd have done them.
It's a really interesting one about regret. Thank you everyone for being so accommodating this morning. I hope I made you all laugh. I would love to encourage you to share a verse from Tehillim with a personal story that connects to it. So try really find something at any point. You open a siddur to any page that really talks to you. I just think it's really powerful. So anyone who wants, or any other ideas you want to share. I know we've got lots of things I'm meant to be researching, like cremation, lots of other things. I don't know. I should bring a pen with me. Leanator. See, there's a regret. I did wrong. I'll do better next time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being accommodating, and we'll see you next week, please, God.